In 2019, Indian introduced us to the FTR, which was a stripped-down naked bike inspired by flat track racing bikes, and since then they've expanded the model lineup with a few more FTRs. One of them is this, the FTR S, and in this video we're going to get it out on the road, show you all the features of it. Let's get into the full review. So the original FTR was a weird bike. Like I said, it was inspired by some flat tracking bikes, and that means it has a weird wheel and tire setup. It used a 19-inch front and an 18-inch rear, and since then Indians kind of revised the package. They've retuned the engine and fitted it with 17-inch wheels front and back, which just makes this a much more capable and much more friendly bike to ride on the street. Alright, just filled up. Not a super huge tank. It's under 3.5 gallons, somewhere in there. And fully topped off. I'm only showing 101 miles of range. Not a problem though. We're not going to be going 100 miles today. So let's get this FTR S out on the road and see what it's like. Now the first thing I noticed when I hopped on this FTR-S was how comfortable the riding position was. I'm a sport bike guy. I ride a naked sport bike as my daily bike. I have a track bike, R6. So I'm used to sitting upright and I'm used to having my legs out behind me. And that's not exactly something that comes to your mind right away when you think of Indian motorcycles. But my legs are kicked pretty far back behind me, and it's pretty sporty. Good amount of engine braking out of this motor. Brings you down to a stop pretty good. I really do like how this FTR handles. We're coming up on some turns here, and it's fun to lean the bike into the turns, carry some speed through. Can't go too crazy because they're doing some road work around here. But yeah, it's a fun bike to move around in the twisties. This feels pretty small. So this weighs over 500 pounds when it's filled with fuel. It's right around 513, I think. And it's pretty light. It feels pretty light. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of bike out in front of me. It feels like the front wheel is kind of below me almost, which definitely leads to it turning in easier, and especially with these 17-inch wheels, this FTR definitely handles a hell of a lot better than the original FTR did. Yeah, it's fun. If you were to put me on this bike without showing me what it was, and I was just kind of riding it without looking at any images of it or seeing any logos, I don't think I would think it's an Indian or a V-twin. Powering this FTR-S is a very beautiful 1203cc liquid-cooled V-twin that makes 120 horsepower and 87 pound-feet of torque, and it's a really torquey motor. You can really feel that out on the street. None of the internals of this motor have been changed from what was originally introduced in 2019. Just the throttle mapping and some of the engine tuning has been changed to make this a little more easy to get into the power on the street. That's mated to a 6-speed manual transmission, and it's actually from the factory. Got a pretty cool exhaust on it from Akrapovich. Uses these twin cans in the back and even has this little carbon fiber trim piece right here. Let's take a listen. Sounds pretty good. Not the loudest bike in the world. You can thank the European emissions regulators for that, but I'm sure if you wanted to, you could probably open this up and it would sound pretty good. Now I'm chugging along here, 4th gear, 53 miles an hour, about 3,700 RPM. And I'll show you what I mean when I say this is a torquey motor. I'm just gonna crack it wide open. It accelerates. You don't really need to be in a low gear. I'll do it again in 5th gear. 5th gear, loping along at 3,000 RPM. And just like that, we're almost at 70. So in terms of twist and go, this bike's got it. You really don't need to downshift when you think you might need to get good power out of it. It kind of takes off no matter what gear you're in. I will say the clutch took me a couple minutes to get used to. I have stalled this bike multiple times at red lights, especially the first time I rode it. And I think that's just because the clutch is really grabby, but it's got a really small window where it actually grabs. And Case noticed that too. It was the first thing I noticed when I got on this bike. I've since gotten a lot better at feathering this clutch, but definitely one of my least favorite parts about the bike is how delicate you have to be with the clutch. Once you get kind of dialed into that zone, your muscle memory picks up on it and it's not an issue, but I've ridden a lot of motorcycles and I usually don't have to put that much thought into my clutch hand as I did on this bike. I wish there was a little more padding in the seat. It's already starting to hurt my butt a little bit and I haven't been on this bike all that long. And then as far as where my legs have to grip, it's pretty good. It's got a nice wide tank. I feel like I have a good spot to grip my legs onto. All good there. Now, as far as suspension goes, up front you're looking at a set of 43mm inverted forks from Sachs. Fully adjustable so you can dial in all your settings, but it is worth noting on this S model, that's the suspension you get, but if you jump up to the FTR R, you're going to get a much higher end Öhlins suspension system. And then moving around to the rear, pretty cool setup here as well. Monoshock, but it is mounted off to the right side. Again, this is also by Sachs. Again, this is fully adjustable, and it even has a little piggyback reservoir off to the back. So pretty good premium European suspension components, but not quite the top of the line Öhlins components you get on the top of the line FTR. Suspension travel has actually been reduced when you look at this bike compared to the original FTR. 4.7 inches on this bike compared to the old 5.9 inches. But the FTR was never made to be a dirt bike. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And really that just makes this easier to ride, easier to get your feet on the ground. The seat's lower than it used to be. So all in all, I don't think less suspension travel is necessarily a bad thing on this street bike. All right, up front for brakes, you're looking at dual 320mm discs with 4-piston Brembo calipers, steel braided brake lines. It's a pretty good stopping setup. It doesn't have a crazy amount of stopping power. This is a heavy bike. You do have to pull the lever pretty hard, but it does get you down to a stop, no issues whatsoever. And then in the rear, a 260mm disc with a 2-piston Brembo caliper. These are Metzler Sporttech tires, and this is a 180 width rear on a 17-inch wheel. And I'm super glad to see 17-inch wheels front and back on this bike. 17-inch wheels just make sense on a street bike. 19 and 18-inch staggered wheels doesn't make so much sense on a street bike. So glad to see some sticky rubber in the right sizes to take you on some really aggressive rides. All right, I'm going to put it into sport mode, give you a little bit of a sport mode acceleration run here. Yeah, it's got a lot of power, it takes off. The motorcycle I own that I daily is an MT-09, and I absolutely love the bike. And I did not expect this Indian to feel so similar to my MT-09 in terms of how it handles. It's crazy. This is a big old V-twin, weighs over 500 pounds, and it feels like a naked sport bike. I guess I shouldn't really be that surprised because it kind of is a naked sport bike. But there aren't too many naked bikes with big old V-twins, and I was a little skeptical, but I like this package. I like how it handles. It's got a crazy amount of torque, and I like the V-twin sound. I do. I do wish the bike was a little bit louder. It's so quiet. I can't hear it at all at 4,200 RPM. Once you get into it, you get a little bit of grunting, but it's too quiet. I know most new bikes these days are too quiet, but this looks like it should be loud, and I wish it was. Brakes aren't fabulous, but not bad. You do have to squeeze a good bit to engage them, but once they're engaged, they grab quite well. They could be a little bit stronger, and they are stronger on some other bikes with similar components that have this much power. They work though, they're fine. All right, let's just talk about the style for a sec, because I think this is a really good looking bike. This FTR S is done in the white smoke color scheme, but you can also get it in maroon. But I think this is the best color scheme you can get this bike in. This white has a little bit of pearl in it, even though it's a matte finish, which looks really good in the sunlight. A little bit of a shady day today, but these red accents just look really good throughout the bike. On the wheels, the shock, the fork caps, everything just kind of ties together nicely, and it's a really good look. Around back, really streamlined setup. You do have this kind of hideous, if you ask me, rear bumper slash license plate holder that I'm sure most owners will rip right off of there and put some kind of plate mount under the tail. But all in all, it's a really cool looking bike. It's got that flat track style to it, big V-twin in the center there, but stripped down, kind of a flat design here like the old flat track bikes. And overall, just a really cool bike to look at. Everyone at the office has been drooling over this thing, and everyone's in agreement that this is a really good looking motorcycle. I wouldn't call this bike like a hooligan machine. It's not crazy, but it definitely can get rowdy. That front wheel definitely feels like it gets way lighter when you get heavy into the throttle. And that's a characteristic I love in a motorcycle. That's where I wish I had a little more stopping power. Now, merging onto the highway here, I think this is a really good highway bike. You know, not for long haul on the highway, but for commuting. If you need to get on the highway for 10-20 miles, this is perfect. The reason being, it's got plenty of torque, so highway speeds, you got plenty of passing power without needing to really worry about what gear you're in. But then also you've got cruise control, so tap that button there. I'm gonna set to 65, and now hands off, and it's holding its speed. Pretty cool. You can up the speed right there with the toggle up. You can down your speed, same thing, going down. This big V-twin is a little bit vibrating and shaky at highway speeds. Definitely a good amount of vibrations coming through the handlebars. Not so much the foot pegs though, but it's not the worst I've felt. Honestly, doesn't bother me all that much. Key placement is right here under the screen. Turn that on and this dash will come to life. If you're familiar with Indians and Polaris, you should know the Ride Command system. This is a 4.3-inch LCD screen with Ride Command, of course. Takes a minute to boot up, but once you're in, it's a touch screen. It works with gloves, which is really cool. You do have some dummy lights here on the bottom for, you know, your neutral indicator and turn signal, stuff like that. But once you're in here, everything's super easy to see. It's colorful and bright and direct sunlight, which is good. So you've got your tach here, you've got your fuel indicator with a little range estimator, speedometer, gear indicator. I've never seen this before on a motorcycle, a little waypoint or what direction you're heading, some temperatures there, odometer, trip computer, which looks like it's never actually been zeroed out. You can also switch it into a different display if you prefer kind of the old school analog setup there, but then you can go in and kind of customize things. So you have brightness controls. You can also select auto, which is pretty cool. Rain, standard, and sport modes, so you can toggle through those, and you can do that on the fly while you're riding as long as the throttle's closed. I've been leaving it in standard. I think that's kind of the happy balance for this bike. You also have traction control, which you can switch on or off. I've been leaving it on because I I like having nannies like that. But this bike also does have cornering ABS. The traction control is cornering traction control as well. Wheelie control and rear wheel lift mitigation. However, the only one of those you can actually disable is the traction control. You've also got Bluetooth connectivity, so you can hook up your phone for music or phone calls. This doesn't have speakers built in. That's just to interface with some sort of Cardo or Sena system you have mounted in your helmet. And lastly, you can go into settings here and go over to vehicle settings. It has an oil life reminder, but it also has cylinder deactivation, which is really funky. So if you turn that on, you'll get this little icon here when you come to a stop. That'll show you that the rear cylinder has been deactivated. You're only running on one cylinder. That's only for idling at stoplights. It's supposed to remove some heat from the bike, cool down your legs a little bit, but funny to see, and it kind of sounds like an old school thumper when you have that going. Woo! One thing I don't love is how you can't actually toggle the ride modes using this. It actually just brings up the menu and then you have to go in and touch it. It's not the worst thing in the world. Could be worse. It's still pretty easy to use and it still works with gloves on. But I wish you could toggle using this so you didn't actually have to take your hand off the handlebar to switch ride modes. And I forgot to mention, you've got a little USB type A port right here. So if you have your phone mounted or a GoPro or whatever, you can power it off that right there. I've been really impressed with this motorcycle. For one, I think it's the most beautiful bike I've ridden all year. It's just gorgeous. But I don't think there's too many bikes out there that combine this level of style with this level of performance, especially in the V-twin world. I did not expect this to handle and to be as sporty as it is, but you can get pretty rowdy on this bike and have a lot of fun. And it rides like a sport bike, which I was not expecting to say when I started to make this video. So there you have it, the Indian FTR-S. I had a lot of fun on this bike. It looks beautiful. It's got a hell of a lot of torque, and the build quality is just really good. I have really no complaints about it. There's a few things here and there, like the brakes are a little bit squishy, but you can get over that. And really, that's kind of my only complaint. Besides the clutch, I forgot about the clutch. The clutch is also not the best thing in the world, but those are minor things. And I really think if I owned this bike, they're things I would get over pretty quickly. Pricing for this model, the FTR-S, is right around $15,000. They do start lower if you want the base model, and of course you can go higher than that, get nicer suspension, carbon fiber bits, all of that. For 15 grand, I think this is a really appealing bike. It has a lot of stuff here, but 15 grand can also buy you that new Harley-Davidson Sportster S, which is also a really appealing bike. So maybe a year ago, this would have been a really easy buy, but now that there's some competition around, I don't know, let me know down in the comments which one of those two you'd rather have. I can't really say yet because I haven't ridden the Sportster, but it's definitely a topic that interests me. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to head on over to tfl-studios.com so you don't miss any of our content. We'll catch you in the next video.